All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Vinokurov. I am an autistic self-advocate, and you may know me for my millions of roles that I do, such as with being a behavior specialist for a public school district in Florida, as well as being a motivational keynote speaker, and as well as with my other roles with being a BC ABA for full spectrum ABA and being board members for many organizations, such as for the New Jersey Autism Think Tank. So in this session, I'm going to be talking about with early intervention from real impact. And this is about with like insights from my personal experiences growing up with autism, as well as now my professional experiences in the field. So to get started with this, I wanted to start off with talking about my journey because there is a big reason for that. And so for those of you that don't know me and haven't heard my journey and stuff, and also just so you guys know that you may have not known, or if you do know, that I spoke for Autism Connect in their international conference called ICANN back in April of this year. So you may know me. If you don't, I'm going to tell you with my journey to start off with, just so you guys know more about with me. So starting off around the age of 1, my parents didn't really know what was going on with me. They noticed that things were different from me compared to my older sister, Samantha. One of the things that my parents have noticed was the fact that I couldn't verbally communicate. And from there, my parents were noticing more classic signs of autism that were being more present, more observable. So, such as where I would be stimming, where I'm spinning in circles, rocking myself back and forth. I did engage in headbanging as well. And then there was also where I didn't like changes in routine. So, like, if my parents took me out for walks, and I was born in New York. So, if any of you guys that are from New York currently or were born in New York, so every time my parents would take me for walks on the streets in Brooklyn and stuff, and every time there would be a different change in direction, I would throw a fit because I did not handle well with a change in like different paths that we would go for walks on or just any kind of routines I didn't like at all. To even where as little as like where at the time I didn't even like getting hugs from people. Like I was very sensitive by touch so much that I would like push people away or and funny story, my dad tells me to this day how I used to kick his glasses off because I didn't want him holding me when I was a baby. So it was like things like that. And my parents took me to an audiologist, and from there they said that I had perfect hearing. So my parents had a lot of concerns about where I wasn't responding to my name at all, even if people were calling me. And it was my parents were like baffled pretty much. They were like, what is going on with Michelle? So the audiologist said that to take me back to my pediatrician. So went to the pediatrician. This was already about almost when I was turning 2 at this point. And the pediatrician said to my parents that you got to take Michelle to a neurologist to have her go through some evaluations. So the neurologist did a autism evaluation on me. This was already in January of 2000. This was the early 2000s at that point. And from there, after being observed in a hospital called Downstate Hospital in Brooklyn, New York, I was officially diagnosed with autism. After going through like parent interviews, observations, tests, and everything, I was diagnosed with autism around the age of 2. And so this is where the importance of early intervention came in. My parents, when they found out about with me having autism, they wanted to help me build on my skills to help develop and grow. Because at that point, there were doctors that were telling my parents that I wouldn't be able to verbally talk all my life. There were things I was told like never going to college or anything like that. So as soon as that I was diagnosed with autism, my parents were seeking out services for me. And back then, there was no such thing about with Medicaid paying for services. So my parents paid out of pocket for all my early intervention services, and I received a ton. and this was again while I was still living in New York. So I received ABA therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, and occupational therapy, all four types of therapies mixed in one. And I was receiving a mix of those therapies 7 days a week. And you will never hear that again because nowadays there are not as many therapies that are going on as that intense as it is. Although, like, if based on like the individual needs of a child, like if they need it, it depends on what's being worked on and everything, what goals are being worked on. So I I had that early on so intense from the start around age 2. And like I'm saying, my parents like seeked out the services right as soon as that I was diagnosed with autism. So having those therapies was a lot for me. It was definitely very important for me though, because I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for all the services that I received. And I services were starting to fade out by the time that so in 2001 my family and I moved to New Jersey, and because our family was growing, my brother came along, so all those services and everything were starting to fade out because early intervention in New York ends at age 3. So my parents were trying to figure out like where's a way that we can still get services for me. And that was one of the biggest reasons why my family and I moved to New Jersey, because back then they were really known for big on special education in that state. And there was a lot of different options of like specialized schools and all that, which I did go to a specialized school, which was Children's Center of Monmouth County. Ended up going there. It was between with Rutgers Douglas Center and Children's Center, and we ended up with Children's Center. If those of you from New Jersey that know with Rutgers Douglas, that's I know they're still existing today and have a lot of great services there. But yeah, so I went to Children's Center of Monmouth County, and with those services and all, I was still receiving ABA therapy and all my other services at home and in school. More so in school than at home. Home services were starting to fade out for me because I was doing a lot better at home. It was more so in school that I was receiving the services. And I over the years, everything started to fade out. Fun fact for you guys is that I didn't speak my first word verbally until I was 6 years old. And the word was no. Because you hear a lot of kids nowadays, like when I do my work and stuff, I hear students all the time be saying no. So it just makes me laugh so hard. But yeah, I having these services fading out over time because pretty much around the age of 6, my brain started to click a lot with me in regards to like things that are going on in the environment and stuff. Because I'll be honest with you guys, I do not remember too much about with my services and everything before age 6 because I had a huge challenge in regards to being so aware of what was going on in my environment and everything. So a lot of what I was being told growing up was from my parents' perspective, even though like I remember like very, very little, but it's still I wouldn't be where I'm at today and knowing how much that all the services have impacted me. Because I did receive a lot of individualized services and all. And if it wasn't for all the mix of everything, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. But anyways, going back to where I was saying about how my services were starting to fade out over time was because they what would happen is that goals were being met, and so the way that treatment works, like not even I would even say treatment, the more that where therapy works is that therapy you're supposed to fade out services over time. That's how any kind of therapy works, really, is that if as clients are working on skills and stuff and meeting their goals, you start to fade out the support that's needed. So for me, support was fading out for me. Where ABA therapy, I stopped at age 8. A lot of my goals were being met and everything. So when I was in 3rd grade, I was already put into a regular public school district in New Jersey. I grew up in Marlboro, so I went to the Marlboro School District. And at that point, I was only receiving a little bit of physical therapy, occupational therapy, and the most type of therapy that I had throughout my life was speech language therapy. And the reason being because I was still learning to communicate. So growing up, and even during the early days, like around age 2, where I was getting intense therapy services, I was receiving learning to learn all types of communication from from picture exchange communication system to American Sign Language a little bit. So like there were certain signs I'd want, like for bathroom, you have the T sign, you sign, shake your hand back and forth, and that's bathroom. So little things like that. And the funny thing now that I shared a bunch of with my journey with all of you, things that like doctors have said about with not being able to verbally talk or go to college and things like that. Yeah, let's not make assumptions about that. So, um, all the services that I had growing up and through my support system, from my siblings to my parents, that if it wasn't for everybody that's been part of my life, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And I did go to college. Like I went to community college and I also went to a 4-year university. My 4-year university, I did it fully online, my bachelor's program with Purdue University Global Boilermaker. If any of you that go to Purdue currently or graduate from Purdue, that's where I went through. And I went through also with fieldwork in ABA. And what really inspired me about with really going more so in the ABA therapy field compared to my other early intervention services was the fact that I it the whole history with ABA therapy really fascinated me because it's evolved so much. There's things that, that are still out there today that I admit that shouldn't still be happening, but there are things that are also changing because of more providers like myself that are coming out into the field that are neurodivergent. And so implementing more of those compassionate neurodivergent practices, is really important. So in my work today, like I told you guys, I am a board certified behavior analyst assistant, and I'm also a behavior specialist for a public school district. And the things that I've learned to really work with teachers and families with, so I have experience working in the schools and in the home settings. And what I've been going through a lot is with teaching parents and teachers is that, you know, it's important to get down to the client's level or your child's level, like teaching them to adapt to the world in their own ways. There's so much that we're pushing about them adapting to the world like with everybody else, but really we should be teaching about with what how they're navigating the world and how we can tie in things that are through our society's norms and stuff, but at the same time, letting our clients and the children that we work with, letting them navigate the world in their own ways and adapting through them too, as much as they're learning from us. So, because let me tell you something, clients and students and kids, they pick up so much from us. Like pretty observant, just like a lot of us who, like myself, who are autistic, that they pick up so much just from observable actions that we are showing, or even just our word choices that we are using when we're talking to clients, because it really makes a big difference. So, like I told you guys, my first word was no. And I've had, even though I now have like with clients learning to say no, and this is one of my biggest messages to people that, you know, it's important for our clients to be able to advocate for themselves just as much that we are advocating for ourselves as providers, as parents, as teachers. So I, a lot of that, we do like have to say no in certain situations, but there's a fine line where you have to pick and choose your battles of, if we're gonna keep saying no all the time, a lot of times I've seen this in schools and in home settings where it's only escalated the behavior. It doesn't really shape it at all where we want to see a change of behavior. It only just escalates what we don't want to see more often. So I what I try to teach parents and teachers is using alternatives to no, such as where this toy is not available right now. We could play with this toy or this toy, like giving those choices or validating where the client validating the client where I see that you feel upset that this toy is not available right now. Do you want to go play with this toy or do you want to play with this toy? Once we get a chance to play with these toys, later we could come back to that one. So I've seen a lot of change and from a client from being upset to where it's like, oh, okay, I'll come back to that later. So, it's things like that, just the word choice the word usage that we're using makes such a big difference. And I know it can be challenging, and I know again, like things have evolved in the ABA therapy field, all types of therapies, really, and also in our education system. Because I will tell you guys, before I became a BC ABA, I started out as a paraprofessional, and this was when I was living in New Jersey. And today I'm in Florida with my family, but I also have been living on my own independently for more than 6 months now. I live in my own house. I, so let me tell you, like, how much that early intervention really does make a huge impact. Just know like there is potential for every single individual to be able to be as independent as they can be, because that's where we want our own clients to be at. Because I was a client myself, and now going through a full circle and to be able to now provide services to people from my own perspectives and everything, personally and professionally, you know, it is really important that we focus on where we're seeing the client reaching their potential as much as possible. So, like I was saying, going back to where the word choice really does matter, because nowadays, when we're using the word no or stop, would be more so when behaviors are becoming unsafe for the client themselves or others. So let's say that if you have a child that is engaging in aggression towards another person and I'm saying continuously. I'm not saying like one time that a child is gonna punch someone in the arm, like a one time thing, and that's it. Because I've seen stuff like that in the schools where I have clients that are like just going around once and it's not continuous. That's where it's like a really big fine line of like when to say no and when to say stop. So if it's continuous for a good amount of time, like let's say it's been more than like a minute, then that's where we can step in and intervene even more, where we're saying no or stop, like things like that. Because there ethically there has to be a fine line you know, where we gotta keep the child safe and others safe too. Or even like where the key thing though is really implementing things that are more proactive, because intervening when it's that point, we don't want to do that. We want to start intervening when we see signs of agitation. Like if you see like a child showing a sad facial expression or an angry facial expression, or you see like clenching a fist, or you see where there's pacing going on. Because and this is another thing where pacing, I used to do this. When I was younger, I did used to engage in a lot of pacing, where we've known as a type of stimming. And it can be really good for those who are autistic and neurodivergent to be able to self-regulate. So this is another thing that I've worked with teachers on, is that in school settings, for a client to be able to pace themselves, like some teachers are okay with the client doing it in the classroom because it gets, some of them are used to where they need to be able to do it in the classroom. And there's some teachers that prefer where they do it in like the back of the classroom, or they be able to ask for going for a walk instead. So like things like that to be able to teach those replacement skills. But there's also the thing with stimming too, where there's been a huge top like controversy about this is that we don't want to take away a client from an autistic client from stimming. We don't want to do that, because that is a way of regulating. For me, that was my own way of regulating too. And it's the same for everybody else that does engage in stimming. And honestly, let me tell you something, we all engage in types of stimming. It's not just those with autism. Everybody does, whether that's with nail biting or like tapping a pencil on the desk or even just like fidgeting with fingers and stuff, like with hands. We all do types of stimming. So I, that's where it really comes to where we want to teach ways that a client can and our own students or our own child can still access to be able to engage in that regulation. And speaking of with regulation, just so for people to know, there are different ways to teach emotional regulation. And I am a big believer of first starting with co-regulation because the key thing is that in all kinds of therapy, no matter what, we are all human. And so every client is trying to seek some kind of connection. And we're human, like we're going to seek connections and meet and want to be able to meet our needs. So when you have a client that I'll give a good example here is that I was helping out at extended school year because I recently returned to work and everything, and I was helping out half days at extended school year throughout this week. And I had a client that in the classroom that was seeking deep pressure. They would literally stand right behind me. They were showing me, they were guiding me with their hands. And I'll tell you, this client has no verbal expressive language. So they would use gestures, like they would pull me with their hands and stuff and show me where to do like a little like hug and stuff because I knew they wanted pressure. So they were seeking that sensory pressure, but also wanted the one. And honestly, those ways builds connections and positive relationships with the students and clients we're working with. So it was a I'll tell you from that client alone, this kid felt so much better after like having a few minutes of just having that hug and stuff and deep pressure. So, there's clients who do seek that sensory. For me, I actually was under sensitivity with sensory. I didn't want that. I was very sensitive with like from sand to water and didn't like anything touching me, literally. So there's things like that. And also the biggest message too is teaching all kinds of communication. So I'm going to show you guys something really cool that I have. My parents saved it for me when I used to receive early intervention services like ABA therapy. And back then in the early 2000s, there was no such thing as with iPads or having apps, communication apps like Prolo to go. And so this right here is my own little picture exchange communication system. My parents saved it for me from when I was very young and learning how to communicate. And this was like um my kind of way of communicating, there were different pictures in it, such as like with foods or items and etc. So like I had to learn back then how to communicate, and there was a lot of modeling. Nowadays, there's more of the belief in naturalistic teaching and gradually exposing the client to letting them learn to communicate, exploring different words, and then rather just saying like say apple, we're just gonna show them the item of the food and stuff and apple like just things like that rather than just saying like say this or say that like it's not necessary. So really just things like that being more naturalistic and more of like in the real teachable moments is what we focus on now in a lot of approaches and everything. So as you can see, that early intervention is super duper important. Getting the services for your child, for all the families out there today, like getting those services for your child as soon as that they receive a diagnosis. I can't even tell you how many times that I've had to in IEP meetings and et cetera that I'm suggesting the families to reach out to for this provider, like for ABA therapy or even like for other types of therapies or for reach out to autism organizations because there's so many out there to reach out to. So that is the end of my session and all that, but I do want to take a few minutes. I do have 5 minutes, so if there are any questions that you want to be able to share right now, please go ahead, share it in the chat box, and I'll see the questions that come up. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. I love that. Everything is possible with willpower, that's for sure. I agree with you on that. All right. Awesome. All right, perfect.